Tonight I want to share with you something that's very simple to do, yet customers spend a lot of money unnecessarily replacing parts that could have been done by simple maintenance. I'm talking about battery maintenance. Customers have spent a lot of money over the years replacing alternators and starters and sometimes even batteries that didn't need to be replaced, trying to correct a problem that could have been easily fixed by simply maintaining the vehicle battery. Some of the symptoms that they're trying to deal with are a charging system that may show a battery light coming on or it's not charging like it should. Other symptoms might be dim lights or what they call phantom problems. You turn one thing on and something else quits working. Or you may be driving at night with the headlights on and say you tap the brake pedal or turn something else on and the headlights go dim. Your first thought might be, well, I've got a bad battery or I've got a bad alternator, when actually all you need to do is a little battery maintenance. A lot of problems could easily be fixed for, I'm going to say, under $2, the cost of a box of baking soda, and about 30 minutes worth of work. So I'm going to show you one of the simplest things that can be done to a car that most anybody can do. Most of what you need to do battery maintenance is readily available right here. You're going to want a good set of safety glasses. You're going to want a set of gloves. Some rags that you probably never use again because once these get battery acid on them, they're no good. You're going to want a battery cleaner. Now, these are relatively cheap and can be bought at most parts stores. But if you don't have one, I recommend some baking soda. This is a good alternative, very cheap to get. And then some wrenches to take out the battery terminals. Usually it's going to be one of either a 13 millimeter or a 10 millimeter. Some actually use an 8 millimeter or 5/16, but one of these will be needed to take off the battery cable ends. Now, batteries have a pretty simple job, yet they do seem to cause a lot of headache. Anything that leaves the positive cable runs through the vehicle wiring and then eventually has to come back to the battery. Anything that leaves the battery has to come back to it. Anything in between that is resistance. Your different circuits are a form of resistance. But what happens if your resistance is right at the battery? What if you have dirty connections where the 13 volts can't actually leave the battery because there's corrosion or something else built up on the cable? That's kind of resistance you don't want. Let's think of this hose spigot as your car battery. When I turn on this hose here, any water that comes out of here, I would expect to come out of here. The same amount, right? But let's say I have a bad connection here at my hose, or say a bad connection at my battery. Look what happens when I turn it on. Whatever's coming out of here is not going to come out of here because I have a bad connection. Many newer vehicles have very unconventional battery cable ends, such as this one. And if you'll notice, there's several wires that bolt directly to the battery. These are especially important to keep clean because, as you notice, you have a lot of different things that wire directly to the battery that rely solely on battery power. This is a very dirty battery right here. For this video, I'm going to use a more conventional battery with the cable ends that you're probably more familiar with. These have been around for a number of years. This gives us a good example of something to work with. One of the first things you're going to want to do is make sure your battery is clean before you start working on it. I would recommend using some kind of soap and water solution and just clean it off real nice. Spray it down real good, and then using a rag that you're going to dispose of, just clean it off real good. You want a nice clean battery to work with. And now that you have a nice clean battery, the next thing you're going to want to check is, are the cables good and tight? You shouldn't be able to turn them any when you grab them. Again, you probably want to wear gloves when you're doing this because if the battery cables are real dirty and you get any of this acid on you, it's going to burn. But you want to make sure the cables are good and tight. Your next step is you're going to want to remove one of the battery cables. Now, you don't want anything on inside the vehicle like the key, or you're going to get a spark when you remove it. So you're going to loosen it up. And again, you want to make sure you have gloves on. If you get anything on you, it's going to burn. With the loose, you want to wiggle it back and forth. If it's stuck, don't force it. You're just going to want to twist it loose, like so. With the cable off, you're going to use your battery cleaner. This is one of them. They make several different kinds. Some are a brush. This seems to be the more common type you can get. You're just going to give it one good twist around to clean the post off. Then you're going to take the cable itself, terminal. You're going to take the battery cable in and stick your cleaner in there and give it one good turn, making sure you get all the crud out of the inside. Now you're ready to reconnect it to the battery. Now, like I said, you don't want to have anything on it. You're going to get a spark when you connect it. Make sure it's a nice fit, and then tighten it up. When you've done one, you want to repeat the same thing with the other side. Now, what do you do if you don't have a battery cleaner? Say you don't have a commercial battery cleaner like this here. The best thing you can do is get you a box of baking soda. It's relatively cheap. Then you want to make up a good paste of baking soda and water. I've done that here. I've made a nice little paste, and what you can do is, with your cables removed, either use like a non-metallic brush or just pour it on there. Pour the solution on there and let it set for about 5 minutes inside on the terminal and on the cable itself. Make sure it gets on there and covers it really, really well. And let it set, I say, for about 5 minutes. Once you've let your paste set, you want to rinse it off really well. Make sure it's all off there. Once you've dried your battery off, go ahead and reinstall the cable. Tighten that, make sure it's good and tight. You don't want to go so tight that you break the bolt. Again, you want to make sure it's tight, that you can't wiggle it. Then you're going to do the same for the other side. Make yourself a paste of baking soda and water and clean that one off too. There are some good battery cleaners out there that you can spray on your cables to clean them off. And I would say they're really good, but they're not necessary. They're expensive, and baking soda and water are relatively cheap. But if you feel you need to buy something like that, go ahead, because it does work really well. There's some old wives' tales out there that say put a dab of grease on your cable ends after you've cleaned them. They also make some commercially available stuff that you can spray on top of the cables that helps seal them. I don't recommend them. If you keep your battery frequently clean, you should never need them. There should never be amount of time that builds up where you can get corrosion or anything else on the battery. Again, that's a personal choice. I don't recommend them. They don't hurt the battery, but it isn't necessary if you regularly keep your battery clean. If you have a battery with removable tops, now's a good time to check the water level in them. Make sure the battery's very clean. You don't want to take these off and have dirt get down in there. Just insert a screwdriver under them and pop the top off. And you can look down in there and check the water level. It should be up nearly to the top, like this one is. There's usually 2 caps. We're going to remove both of them. And again, you want to wear gloves, and you want to wear your glasses while you're doing this. I don't have my gloves on right now because I want to do this for clarity. If they're low, you want to get some distilled water. And sometimes you can get a battery water container like this and fill up each one. Make sure you use distilled water. If you don't have a battery filler, well, you can just pour it in there. But you want to make sure they're all full. Now, suppose you went to clean your battery cable ends and they were so badly damaged that they wouldn't tighten up, or sometimes they will break right along here. You can replace the cable. That's the ideal way to fix it. But if you're on a budget, you can buy battery cable ends. Some of them bolt together. This one solders on. But what you would do is you would cut the wire right here, and then you'd peel back some insulation, expose the copper wires there. You would insert the new end on and then crimp it down. In this case, this one solders on. Some of them bolt on. Then you have a new battery cable in. It's a good, economical way to fix a battery cable. Finally, when you're done cleaning your battery cables and topping off the water, make sure the battery's bolted down really good. You shouldn't be able to shake it and move it around. Not because there's a danger of it falling inside the engine, but a battery that shakes and jumps around can kind of dislodge the plates inside and cause the battery to short out internally, which will leave you stranded somewhere eventually. Finally, you may wonder, can you check your battery? The short answer is no. You can use a voltmeter and see if you have 13 volts at the battery. But that doesn't tell you the battery is good. That just tells you have 13 available volts. Now, to properly test the battery, you need what's called a load tester that connects to each cable, and then a load is placed against the battery to see if it's able to start the car. Because it may have 13 volts, but it may not have the necessary amperage to start the vehicle. Now, most people would have no reason to own a load tester unless you test a lot of batteries. So the only way to have it properly tested would be to remove it and take it somewhere that does have a load tester to check the battery. After you finish with your battery, I recommend washing your hands with soap and water immediately afterward, because the acid does kind of burn. You'll get this kind of tingling sensation, but wash your hands with some good soap and warm water.